Neela, we can start.
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Good afternoon, and all. It gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all for this 1 month gender sensitization and capacity building program on gender, society, economy, and polity, organized by Department of Women's Studies, Bharidas University, Center for Women's Studies, and the National Service Scheme of Kaveri College for Women, and the Regional Association of Women's Studies, ROS. I welcome you all. May I now request Dr. S. Shubha, Assistant Professor, Department of Women's Studies, Bharidas University, to render welcome address. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ela. Uh, Good afternoon to all. On behalf of the organizers and webinar participants, I'm very happy to welcome Madam Senior Advocate Jayanti Rani, a practicing advocate in Madras High Court bench, Madurai bench. And Madam, good afternoon. I'm happy to invite you to participate in this session as a resource person. Madam, as a senior advocate as well as the social activist who is connecting various social issues, particularly women, children, and other marginalized issues through the legal activism. And Madam Advocate Jayantirani Madam is participating in various committees, both in government and non-government organization related to children and women's issues, and she is very much well known about the all over Tamil Nadu related to child and women friendly policy making related things. Happy to invite Madam to participate this session and sharing her experience and views on violence against women and the related laws and how these laws are uh, actively implemented and executed in society in regular life. And also Madam is going to share the um, recent judgment and reflect the judgments in gender concerns. Thank you so much. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Shubha. Thank you, ma'am, for your warm welcome. It's my privilege to introduce our today's eminent resource person, Madam Jayanti Rani, Senior Advocate, Madras High Court, Madurai Bench, Trichy, for this 1 month gender sensitization and capacity building program. Madam Jayanti Rani is a well-known and reputed advocate in Tiruchi district. For more than 2 decades, she has contributed a lot in her profession as well as to the society. By her initiation and tireless effort, Women Advocates Association was formed in Trichy, and a separate building for the women advocates hurdles was constructed. She was the first secretary of the association and former president of the association. Her long-term professional assistance to women and families in collaboration with the leading NGOs in Trichy like Softfeed, Kajamalai Ladies Association, TMSSS, etc., and all women police station is noteworthy. Since 1989, she has been rendering welfare and legal services for the children in conflict with the law, and she has taken keen interest in them. In 2007, she was appointed as the member of Child Welfare Committee, Trichy, under the Justice Act by Government of Tamil Nadu for 4 districts, namely Tiruchi, Peramballur, Ariyalur, and Karur. This new position has given her wider scope to serve the children in the need of care and protection. Her role as a trainer, resource person, and guest speaker in programs of voluntary associations, schools, colleges, police department, government department, district court legal service authority camps is commendable. She has made great contribution in creating awareness on gender issues, women's rights, legal rights, social rights among women, youth, students, police officials, transgenders, sex workers, people living with HIV/AIDS, self-help groups, and general public throughout her network. She has been sharing her expertise and knowledge by being panel member in Lok Adalt, panel advocate in Legal Aid Committee, advisory committee member in AIDS Prevention and Care Project of Positive Network for People Living with HIV/AIDS, Anbalayam, and Snehidam, a community-based organization for transgenders, advisory committee members of all the family counseling centers, Childline, human rights foundations, and many others. Participants, kindly mute your microphone. She is appointed as advocate for the Southern Railway to handle cases pertaining to the railways in Tiruchirappalli division and at Madurai bench of Madras High Court. Adding further to her cap is the immediate intervention with regard to child marriages in and around Tiruchi, Perambalur and Arilur district on a phone call. So far, she has, along with the district social welfare officer, has intervened and prevented nearly 185 child marriages and rehabilitated all the victim children in different situations. Above all, she is managing trustee of Parents Trust. Participants, kindly mute your microphone. A social service organization founded for the holistic development of needy individuals, women, children, families, aged community at large. Though Parent Trust is presently doing commendable service to the student community, especially the teenagers, by running a special family counseling center for adolescents at Thillai Nagar. Yet another project is her notable service to be aged by way of establishing the Jeevan Residency Home for the Elderly. Former member of Tamil Nadu State Commission for Protection of Child Rights conferred by the government of Tamil Nadu is yet another milestone of her achievement. True motto of the Parents Trust, namely love, care, share. Mrs. Jayanti Rani is a lovable, caring personality who readily shares her services for the people in the distress. She is the panel advocate of Southern Railways Trichy, panel advocate for the State Legal Services Authority Madurai bench, practicing on the civil criminal writ jurisdiction at High Court Madras and Madurai, practicing at the District Court at Trichy for the 25 years, trained advocate of the State and District Legal Services Authority and TANSAS to deal cases of people living with HIV and AIDS, trained mediator of the Meditation and Consolation Center of the High Court of Madras, Madurai bench. He is a former member of Tamil Nadu State Commission for Protection of Child Rights, Vice President, Tamil Nadu Federation of Women Lawyers, High Court, Madras, former President of Women Advocates Association, former member of Child Welfare Committee, Tiruchirappalli, member Social Worker, Indian Council for Child Welfare, Trichy district, nominated by Jayashree Muralidharan, District Collector, Trichy. With all these merit, I request Jayanti Rani Madam to take over the session. Welcome you, ma'am. Participants, kindly mute your microphone. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
so on behalf of I also welcome Madam Jayanti Rani for readily accepting to be the resource person today. And I think she is also now appointed as the member LCC, that is not there in the biodata. So local committee member. And in the COVID hours also, she has been actively involved in representing the needs of the vulnerable to the government, and you could see them there in the newspapers. And so she is by profession, Sumoto used to bring the issues out, and today it is going to be a different kind of a discussion where we will be exposed to what you call the kind of judgments which are quite regressive and may not be comfortable for women. Of course, there are landmark judgments. I think she will highlight them also. But some of them, in Chennai, there was one that you should not cross the Lakshmana Rekha. In this time also, there was some such judgments. So, Madam will focus on such aspects, because I was thinking that just focusing on women and law, that is happening everywhere. But understanding the judgments in a gender perspective, Madam is the right person to expose to us. So, thank you for being here, ma'am. Over to Neela.
I request Madam Jayanti Rani to take over the session. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you for first and foremost to Dr. Manimeklai, Neela, NSS of Kaveri College and RAW. It is a very great pleasure to be amongst so much of learned persons, and it is going to be really, I think it can be of one side, more than one side of lecturing, because all of you are more bound to that and used to it. But my type of talking with people is, let all of us talk. But physically, when it is a physical meeting, maybe that could be more possible. But now it is virtual meeting where we also can, to some extent, we can have it in a more uh, descriptive and what is a more interactive session, I feel, because giving my view on a judgment may be a different thing, but how we understand totally and what we can do about it is another thing. First and foremost, before we go into the judgments, I just want to give a bird's eye view of my intake of the laws which have been enacted in favor of and for the benefit of women folk in a different perspective, so to say. It is basically a gender right oriented matter, wherein we can see the legislations for the benefit of women right from the womb of the mother to the cemetery. So in that way, I just want to have a rush through the acts which had evolved over the time for certain reasons, and how women right from their birth they have been affected till their death. So in that way, we will be having a bird's eye view of what are all the legislations, especially which are enacted to combat violence against women and children in all aspects. There are certain things which we have not focused when we are talking about violence, because it is not only for the vulnerable, even the well-to-do, and on the other side of women also, there are certain things which we need to be focused. And I would like to first keep a requisition to Dr. Manimeglai, because 2 days past I had a very interesting session on the legal protection for women entrepreneurs. So in that way, we see so many women entrepreneurs being subject to violence in so many ways, in a very white-collared manner also. So I think if Dr. Manimeglai can include that session within your gender sensitization, this 1 month program, please try to have it with focus on them. That would be it was a good topic for me, but it can be more auditor oriented subject. I will come out to that also while we are talking now. Okay. Now with regard to rights, when we talk about rights, gender rights, whatever rights, women rights, it is a basic thing we have to see. Our constitution itself guarantees equality before law and equal protection of law. And apart from that, it is the fundamental duty of the state to ensure protection and see that no discrimination is rendered upon women and children on the basis of caste, creed, race, religion, or anything whatsoever it is. Now everything is, we all know, it has been, we are a signatory to the UNO, and the CEDAW has taken its own turn. And though we have signed the treaty in 1992, we have taken our own time to enact the laws protecting children and children. I would like to share some of my experiences in implementing these laws, because I think that would be more relevant than talking just what is the text on the books. Right, my conception, usually we think 0 to 18 is the normal age for a child. We call a child who is between 0 to 18. But my extra hand goes this way. It is -9 to 18, because the 9 months the fetus inside the mother's womb has also got the right to come out of the mother's womb as a child, and more so a girl child, because we have been pushed and forced to enact a law called the Preconception Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act 1994, only for the reason that the fetus in the mother's womb was a female fetus. So when we started killing the fetus or aborting the fetus just for the sake that it is a female gender, we have started losing so many of the lives of females. And now everybody knows the ratio of the male female ratio is 1000 to 914, and still in Chhattisgarh it has gone to the level of 897 or something like that. So the cause and the time where we have woken up to protect even the birthright of a child is the most important part, because whatever we talk about women's rights or anything cannot be made or implemented or taken into action unless the person is alive here. So it was a very big necessity for the government due to the pressure of so many women activists. Hats off to all those who have taken part in the cause of bringing out this act to save the female fetuses inside the mother's womb. So this is the first and starting point where the 9 months or even the 4th or 5th month until 25 weeks, every mother has the right to abort her child, but only for the reason that it was a female fetus, to abort it was a very big sin. It has to be considered as a sin, and it is a deliberate violence on the female fetus. So we have successfully brought this act, and how far it is being implemented. That I have a very big experience when I was a member of the Child Rights Protection Commission, wherein Namakkal district had the most number of labs wherein they had killed the female fetuses because it has never come into light. And when we were there on inspection and had come to find out that these labs are just not paying any heed to this act, we had taken the help of the district administration, wherein the district collector then, she was a lady district collector, and she was bold enough to seal all the labs there. And also she was able to seal all the hospitals which were indulged in this act of aborting female fetuses. So that was a very big experience for us when we were there. And the next stage when the fetus has come out is, as we have seen in so many cases, and we have lost millions of female children, we have come to the enactment of the Female Infanticide Act, which also has gone a long way in protecting the female children. But it is disheartening to note that again this practice which was in vogue of killing the female children has started popping up again in the same districts of Madurai, Usilampatti and Dharmaburi, because very recently 2 cases we have intervened where the mother-in-law and the father of the child which was born had just killed the child by smashing the head in Usilampatti, and in the other case they were more heartful to pour the raw rice and the milk of a deadly poisonous plant. So these 2 cases, both the culprits were namely the father of the child and the grandma of the child were arrested, and they have been in jail so far, but COVID came as a big boon for them to come out of the prison. So these are cases where we have directly involved, and we were able to, even our intervening petitions could not be effectively handled because of the COVID. And the reason the Supreme Court has given that in the season of this COVID-19, there is every likelihood of corona being, all the inmates being infected. So they have been enlarged on bail with a condition to appear on the date whenever the court directs them to appear. So, even though we have enacted this Female Infanticide Act and we have been very successful in protecting women children, but there is a fear we are reverting back to the corridors again where this is coming up, and I feel the implementation of the act must be in a very more stricter manner, because people, when they dare not to respect the law, then we should make them understand that law will come down forcefully on them if they do the wrong. So this is another instance where it was a very personal experience for me. The next stage of the child is again when it starts going to school and when it is out in the society. And as a society, we are bound to protect the child, but what we are doing, and as part of the society, how we are helping them to face the violence or prevent the violence against them is a very big question mark. And all of us are doing our best, but still then violence prevails on girl children and women in all forms, or it takes any new form whenever the old goes on or it is being suppressed. Now, when the girl child comes out, again we can see so many aspects. Now, the newly enacted POCSO Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, it's a very big eye-opener, and so much of awareness is being created on this act to protect the girl children. But everything again, we have to point out to the perpetrators who have the mind. I had to go across a very recent judgment of the Jharkhand High Court, wherein the rape victim was asked by the High Court to tie a rakhi to the accused person or the perpetrator in lieu of the trial which has been going on there. So this kind, it is a very recent judgment, and it was shocking to see that a court is bending up to this level of asking the rape victim to tie a rakhi for the accused who has put her into such a vulnerable condition. I really leave this aspect to your to ponder over this point with relation to the gender equality, how much of sensitization is being there even to the judges. So this is a kind of, and because even in Madras High Court, there was a case where the rape victim was asked to consider under the mediation center for marrying the culprit, the accused, rather than giving him any sentence or punishing him to any level. So this was this created a very big uproar here in Tamil Nadu, and luckily that judge, by the time everything could be settled down, he was his period as a judge came down, and again the case was taken up, and it was made clear that it was only an option for the victim to marry the culprit, but or get a monetary benefit or compensation, but which was turned down by the victim girl. So there are instances like this wherein we ourselves are, I could say like that only, as a girl child, as a mother, as a sister, as a daughter, as a wife, we are still being looked as more as a property, as a commodity, rather than human beings with a state of mind, with our own emotions, with our own likings, and all these things. But slowly we are coming out, and hats off to those who have worked for us to come up to this level, to think and talk and work for the downtrodden sisters who are with us, and only to those persons who have made it today that education alone can make women come up in their life and stand on their own footing. And in that way, really, from 1960s, the hats off and thanks to all those persons who have made it that today we see girl children excel in education and in all the competitive examinations.
Jayanti ma'am.
Yes,
yeah,
sorry.
okay.
We are here, we are able to, sorry for the interruption, okay. We are able to stand up in our life because the education aspect has given us all these courage and the reasoning power which we have failed to use all these days. Now, basically being a patriarchal society, yes, definitely even today, all of us are dependent on for some of the other aspect on men, but very few have come out successfully. And coming to the next stage where we have to see what how women have been made to undergo so much of violence or tortures in all kinds is when the next stage from the school, they come out to the society, to the colleges or the universities or wherever it is to continue their education. And we again, I would like to take up the Tamil Nadu case only, where we have again been forced to enact a law to protect them even on their way to school or their exposure to the public. It was formerly called in Tamil Nadu as the Eve-Teasing Act, but subsequently it has been the nomenclature has been changed as and renamed as the Sexual Harassment Act by the Tamil Nadu government. And this the case which was behind for the reason for the enactment of this act is the Sarika Lal's case, wherein the college girl who was standing in the bus stop waiting for a bus after the college hours, she was pulled by a group of men in the auto. Her dupatta was caught to hold by the one of the persons in the auto, and she was dragged in the road, open road, and she had lost her life in that event. And that eve-teasing was taken as a very serious offense only after the death of Sarika Shah, and we had to enact this law as Eve-Teasing Act, but later it was renamed as Sexual Harassment of Women, Sexual Harassment Act. Now, next stage is again into the colleges. If you go, again we have the case of Navarasu, who was killed and packed. His body was cut into pieces, was packed and thrown in various parts only due to ragging of the seniors. So this Navarasu was case in the Medical College of Alagappa University was another big issue, which
Annamalai University.
Annamalai University, which has taken a very big thought, and we have again come out with the Anti-Ragging Act. Now, in most of the institutions, it has been curbed, but still there exists in some of the places. We have got recent cases of in the IIT campus also. So, whatever the law is and however efforts are being made, implementation part of the law is being a very, very hard part of it, and is a very big challenge for every one of us. Next stage is again after coming out of the universities or after your studies, again either we go to work or we go into the matrimonial part of the life. Now, matrimonial laws, we all know the Dowry Prohibition Act, then the very important act which has been recently enacted, and it is in a very big manner it has taken a turn, the Domestic Violence Act, and the Divorce Act, the divorce petitions today. So to say, in the 90s when I was in the court, hardly 10 cases would come up for divorce. But now, every day, 10 cases are being filed, and an average of nearly 1,000 to 1,200 cases are being numbered in the courts, and family courts have come in now to especially deal with these cases. So these are certain laws which have come as and when the time have eroded, and we have seen how many millions of women and children have undergone so much of tortures and so much of violence in very different manners, and that is why all these legislations have come into act. Now, another reason, at workplace, if you see, everybody know the POSH has come into existence, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act. Now, this is based on the Vishaka judgment and the guidelines which the Supreme Court has given to the government. So these are all certain things which, the important acts which we have enacted. But what is the implementation part? How far we have succeeded in implementing these acts? That is a very big question, because laws are there, and every woman has got the right to implement the law, and every woman has got the right to question the violence which has been done against her. So many things have come out, and still we are facing so many events, and we are hearing so many cases where women are being put to untold misery, and there are women who never open their mouth whatever happens to them, and they just go on and on how they are. So in this context, I would like to talk about one case in relation to this POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Offence Act of Workplace for Women. There are two cases which have been dealt very recently in February 2021 by the High Court and one by the Supreme Court. Now, the Madras High Court in one case has stated that this is a case which is against the woman, because the Madras High Court has dismissed the case on the ground that this POSH Act cannot be misused by women to harass someone with non-existent allegations. And also they have given a instruction that, and they have given a finding that a solitary allegation of intemperate language against a female employee does not constitute an offence under the POSH Act. Again, I repeat, the finding or an observation by the Madras High Court by a division bench, a solitary allegation of intemperate language against a female employee does not constitute an offence under the POSH Act. How are we to take this? Now, in this case, if in relation to this case alone, maybe this could be a good finding.
Ma'am, kindly, the abbreviated terms can be expanded. Some of them may not be familiar with.
POSH Act. Okay. See, the Madras High Court in this case, in 2013, this female employee gives a complaint, says a complaint that she is not being treated properly. But everywhere what she says is, they are talking rubbish of me, and she used just the word, it is a sexual harassment for me, it is a sexual harassment for me, but she was not very clear with the type of harassment or what actually happened to her, what was the impact of that harassment to her. When she has given the complaint in 2013, but since there was no action, the management fails to take any action. So what she does is, she gives a complaint to the Tamil Nadu State Commission for Women. She forwards the complaint to them. Tamil Nadu State Commission for Women in turn forwards the complaint to the district collectorate, asking the district local complaints committee to enquire the matter and send a report. Now this time gap of this communication process and the formation of the district local complaints committee, another 3 years lapses, and in 2016 this district complaint committee is formed, and this woman employee is being called for the inquiry. Meanwhile, as soon as she files a complaint with the Commission for Women, Tamil Nadu Commission for Women, the management wakes up to the situation and it forms an internal complaints committee and starts its inquiry on the complaint given in 2013, wherein she has not stated any specific incident or anything which has contributed to the sexual harassment of her. Now in 2016, she gives a very elaborate complaint wherein she elaborates everything which has not been said, not even a word has been whispered in the complaint given in 2013. Now she fails to attend the internal complaints committee inquiry. She attends only the district local complaints committee inquiry. Meanwhile, the internal complaints committee, it takes up suo motu departmental action against the perpetrator and a punishment is being passed. Now that person, he goes on appeal to the High Court on the verdict of the internal complaints committee. Now the High Court goes through everything and on its inquiry, the High Court finds out that the woman has misused this Prevention of Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act, and she has, without any allegation which has existed right in the year 2013 or in between after that, has come out with a false allegation, because the Act says that for every false allegation, the aggrieved person who has been penalized for the complaint can file a complaint against the petitioner who has falsely given a complaint against him. So in that way, the Madras High Court was very clear with this case, stating that this Protection of Women from Sexual Offences at Workplace Act cannot be misused by women to harass someone with non-existent allegations. So, and it has observed in the end of the judgment stating that a solitary allegation of intemperate language, because the Act defines what are all sexual harassment, what all contributes sexual harassment towards the women. In that way, even a language, a song, a gesture, whatever it is an offense as per the Act. But in this particular case, the Madras High Court Division Bench has stated that a solitary allegation of intemperate language against a female employee does not constitute an offense under this Act. Now, I fear that this observation, just this one line observation, will be taken out as a defense in the forthcoming cases which tend to be verbal or non-verbal harassment sexually for women at workplace. And we have got, and we have to again fight more and more to bring down this or to remake this situation, that intemperate language also will be an offense under sexual harassment of women at workplace act, because this is now, this one line observation is a very big challenge before us, is it not, Madam Manimekle?
Yeah, very much. Even the participants have also, yeah, it is the so-called, so much has been, so much struggle has been there to get this act, but unfortunately it is getting diluted in a one case.
This is because of one insensitive act by this lady who has taken up as a false allegation, and the court has also observed that she has come out with this complaint only to settle her personal scores with the concerned person against whom she has alleged. So this is one case which was really disturbing me right from, I came across this only during this COVID time when we were just refreshing through the judgments. This was really a heart-rending judgment, wherein our struggle and fight has been made more to overcome this. Now, just an opposite case, again during this, before this COVID can start, has been decided by our Supreme Court, where it has said that Supreme Court was in very clear terms, they have said, this is not, this is a different case, wherein a Scale 4 officer of Punjab and Sindh Bank at Indore was all of a sudden transferred to another place, in a very far off place, wherein only a person of Scale 1 officer can take up that post. Now, what was the wrong done by this Scale 4 officer to be transferred to another place? His only thing is, she had questioned the transparency and the corruption and the irregularities the bank was carrying out in her branch. So only for this reason, and she has brought out how she was sexually harassed by her senior officer in her branch. So to give a closure to the complaint of the sexual harassment she has undergone by her senior officer, this aspect of her poking her nose into the irregularities and corruption of the branch was taken up as a cause, and she was transferred. She challenged it. The internal complaints committee also was not in favor of her, so she had approached the Supreme Court to sustain her dignity and her right to be again replaced in her original branch at Indore. The Supreme Court was very beneficial to her, and it has observed that the sexual harassment at workplace is an affront to their fundamental right to equality and life, and a life they have to live with dignity. So this is a very welcoming judgment, wherein Supreme Court has taken into consideration the aspect, and they have also directed the Punjab and Sindh Bank to repost her in the same branch where she was working, to form a separate committee to go into the irregularities and corruptions which she has pointed out, and also has asked the bank to pay her 50,000 rupees towards the litigation costs. So this is a very welcoming judgment, and again I would like to highlight this one sentence which the Supreme Court has observed in favor of the woman, and which is a welcoming judgment for all those who are going to fight for the cause of their harassment at workplace, their sexual harassment at workplace. Sexual harassment at workplace is an affront to their fundamental right to equality and a life with dignity. So our constitutional right to live with dignity has been upheld by the Supreme Court in this case law. After reading this case law, it was really a happy moment where at least still law and justice prevails, and at least if the judges are benevolent enough to bend to see that justice is made to women. So in that manner, these two judgments have made a very big, what to say, approach into this sexual harassment of, and this is very recent. We have got uh, past judgments, but I just wanted, because this is what to say, it was a fresh ghee on the hand, which has come very recently in February and March. Now, yet another aspect with regard to the Domestic Violence Act, I just want to make a very small thought of it, because many of us think, because another one drastic judgment has come from the Madras High Court, wherein the limitation has been fixed for that act now. Actually, Domestic Violence Act does not talk about the limitation at all, because it talks about the limitation only in section 32 for the execution of the orders which we have got during the trial, or ex parte orders, or whatever, or protection orders, or whatever interim orders we have got. For the execution of those orders, a limitation of 1 year has been fixed by the act. But to file an initial complaint for any act of domestic violence, the act is very silent about the limitation. But again, during this COVID season, we have got a judgment. Many of us have not gone through it, and since it is COVID, it has not been widely published, and we are not able to get into it. I am unable to get the web copy also of it, so I'm unable to tell you the crux of what is the facts of the case, but I can just say the verdict which has been passed in that case is by a single bench, stating that the violence could have committed in so many period of time, but from the last point, or from the last incidents of violence, within 1 year you have to file a domestic violence complaint under section 12 of Domestic Violence Act. I look this judgment as it is as a misinterpretation of the law, because the law is very clearly and very clear, and is absolutely silent about the period over which the offense could have been committed, and the limitation aspect is very not at all shown there, but the limitation only for the execution has been shown. And I construe it in my view as that the court has been misled or misrepresented in stating that the execution point of time should be considered also for the initiation of the proceedings for under the Domestic Violence Act, even for the complaint. Now, there are cases where women have to be consoled, convinced, and motivated to come out with a complaint under Domestic Violence Act, because it is more of a civil nature. This act is more, everybody think that since it is being tried by a magisterial court, it is more of a criminal based act, but it is more a civil based act, and this civil law is more fully handled in this act, because the right for maintenance, the right to live in a shared household, the right for residence, the right for protection are all civil rights which has to be claimed as a civil right, and that is why this act is more of a civil in nature than of a criminal nature. When does this criminal aspect comes into this act is when you get an order for your civil right. When a aggrieved woman gets an order for the civil right of protection or maintenance or custody of child or for compensation or for shared living, whatever interim order or order in after a full trial she gets, when it is not being obeyed by the respondent against whom this order has been passed, then the right to the civil nature or the order of in civil nature turns into a criminal nature, where you can execute the order using the criminal procedure code, and you can go in for criminal action for the non-execution or non-obedience of the order by the court. So this is a very important aspect, and there is a very recent judgment in this case that because in Domestic Violence Act you have to be in a relationship, but here there is one judgment where the high courts have passed that living together for 10 years in the nature of marriage, it is not necessary the ceremony of marriage needs to be performed if they live together as husband and wife for the past 10 years. Then it can be taken into consideration that they are husband and wife, and the wife has got all the right to proceed under the Domestic Violence Act for whatever relief she wants under this act. Now, this is a very far-fetching judgment, because so far living together was seen for a very short period, very short month, a very short period of 6 months, 1 year or something like that. Now, a continuous stay of a man and a woman together under one roof for nearly 10 years can be construed that they are husband and wife, and the women can challenge the husband for any violence done to her under that one roof during her stay for all those period. Now, this is a welcoming judgment, but again, we are here to see that it is not being misused, because every beneficial act for women becomes a strain to all the other needed women only because of this handful of women who misuse this, all the acts. There are misuse of each and every act which has been enacted for the entire benefit of the women's society. All the laws relating to women are beneficial acts only to uphold their person, property, and dignity. Above this, a woman has nothing to gain in her life. Her person should be guaranteed. Her life should be guaranteed. That is her person. Her property, whichever she owns or earns, has to be protected, and above all, her dignity. No injury should in any form be done to her dignity. So, upholding all these three things amounts to upholding the right of a woman, and basically everybody know women's right is considered and must be seen as a human right. Now, while talking about this human as a human right and as a woman right, one glaring deficiency I see through is in the property rights of women, because now, of course, the Hindu Succession Act has been amended in 2005, wherein women can equally claim as a male has in the ancestral property. Now, having this on one side, she can have it, she can get a share of hers equal to her male hair from the ancestral property. Okay, she is owning this. What is the next step which is often happening here is, in many cases, in very exceptional cases, the woman tries to have it for her own or for her own use or for the use of her offsprings and everything. But mostly it is being purchased by the male hair itself, or it is being utilized by the in-laws house or the husband. Again, she is deprived of her own independent usage of the property which she has gained as a legal heir to her ancestors. Now, this on one side. While talking about women entrepreneurs, I want to just cite this discrepancy which is existing today and which is not being seen on a very serious side. because all entrepreneurs, all women entrepreneurs, they are either micro, small and medium-sized enterprise owners, or they are small and medium-sized enterprise, SMEs or MSMEs. That's all, MSME, small, medium enterprises or micro, small, medium enterprises. Women are only to that extent, very, very handful of them. You can point out in numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, only are on the top level. Maybe now we can welcome Shivanada's daughter to own and head the Shivanada institution and the entire business entire business of her father, but it is not her own hard-earned or worked enterprise. It is already established for her. She has to manage the establishment to the satisfaction of everybody there. But coming to this self-help groups, because our government has taken a very, very nice and good...
Ma'am, you can take some 5 more minutes and
Okay.
some 10 minutes for discussion also.
Okay, okay. I will be just with this entrepreneurs thing, I will be closing my thing. Now, whenever these small self-help groups or the small, medium-sized entrepreneurs go in for financial assistance to the bank, none of us know that they have been asked for security. Security of not their own property. Even if the woman owns a property of her own, which she has got as a share from her ancestral property, she cannot, and it is not accepted by the financial institutions. They ask for the male partners or the male father or brother and the property owned by them as a security. Even if this woman owns a property, it is not taken into consideration, only for the fear that only males will be able to stand guaranteed for the women. But our self-help group people have proved that they are more, women are more prudent enough to repay, and their repaying capacity is more than the males. But in spite of that, financial institutions are still behind getting a male as a guarantor with a security for the loan which these small and medium and micro enterprises owned by women are taking. The loans are from the financial institutions. And one more point is, I want to just hint on the amendment to the company law now, which has opened its eyes that now women are slowly coming into company law as partners or to head the boards. The company law has made an amendment under section 143(1) that every company which is registered or every institution or enterprise which is registered under the Companies Act must have a woman, at least one woman in their board of directors. A minimum of one woman and a minimum of maximum of 3 women should be in the board of directors, and it has reiterated that they should be active board of a director in the board of directors. They cannot be a sleeping person there. They should be an active, and they have got all the rights as per the other directors. And one more step further they are going to go is they are contemplating to make it mandatory on the side of the enterprises, those who are registering in the Companies Act, to have an outsider, a woman from outside, to be as a part in the board of directors. So these are all certain important things which are coming out, for which we have to still fight. And as already reiterated, we need to uphold the person, property and the dignity of every woman, whether she is undergoing violence or she is going to undergo any violence or in any sort. Everything pertaining to women must be upheld as per our constitution, and we are all here to help them and support them. Hope we will be getting lesser number of cases in the future, and our dignity and our equality is being upheld in every manner. Thank you very much for the organizers for giving me this opportunity. It is a very wide subject and we have to go in at large, but within a short time, I think I was able to give out my best and hope I have at least given some inputs which will be of every help to you. Thank you very much for all the organizers.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your enlightened session on violence against women legislations, reflections on the recent court judgments. You have explained everything very clearly. Participants, do you have any queries? You can unmute your mic and you can ask. Gopal Singh, sir? Okay.
Madam.
Yeah, there is a question from Amit also, maybe after Gopal Singh.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Madam, I am telling about the humors they make in courts, making women as a laughing stock. One example I would like to give, in Madras High Court, one of the judges asked a woman lawyer whether she was very busy in the kitchen in the morning while she was arguing. Judge took it as a humor, but it is an insult to the advocate. This is the case of Madras High Court. In Karnataka High Court, a judge asked one 20 years experienced the woman activist judge advocate, "Kya pehen ke aate hain?" What type of clothes they wear and come to the court. Indira Jaising, first woman additional Solicitor General, wrote to the Chief Justice about the sexism in courts. Sexism in courts, they take it as human joke, humor as a joke, but not as a sexism. One should be very careful about it. Apart from that, madam, even clients are hesitating to appoint the women as lawyers. Sudha Ramalingam of Madras High Court, she says that if they are having professionalism, then only ladies will be able to sustain in the court. Madras High Court sitting judges, only 3 are women, 24 are men. Supreme Court, the council designates women are only 17, whereas men are 403. In Delhi High Court, the council designates are 8 and men are 229. So if this is the case in the campus of the courts itself, how can we have justice to women through the courts, madam?
Sir, I 100% agree with your views, because all these are facts. It is not just thrown away issues, but we are also fighting against it, as Mrs. Sudha Ramalingam has said.
Yes.
Only true professionalism and those who can talk back with that courage and just uphold the professionalism, only they can withstand and also help other women to get justice. And when we talk about the other women, I would just say that for every general rule, there will be an exception, and that is what is going on there. So we need not worry about those exceptional cases, but those who really feel that their dignity is being just touched, definitely everybody will raise to the occasion. And one among them is Dr. Indira Jaising. She has always been with women and she has fought. And we also very well know how she is now being handled. Thank you.
Madam, I would like to tell all the participants, those who are studying the women's studies, one important point. Please see the video. Please see the video, Desert Flower. Desert Flower is the video about Waris Diary. Waris Diary is an African woman who was circumcised by her childhood. She left her abode in Somalia and she became a superstar in the world. She opposed the entire world and stood as a superstar and opposing these traditional systems. So I ask all the participants to see the movie, which is called as Desert Flower. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah, Shobha Sindhi.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Thank you for a wonderful lecture. You gave so many examples from your own personal experience. But don't you think that justice delayed is justice denied? And the common man has lost his faith in the legal system and in the judiciary. What should be done that every time you go to the court, you get the next date, next date, next date? And this delay in getting justice is something which a common man is so much afraid of that he avoids going to the court. Can you please explain?
Yes, ma'am. Adjournments in court is not only on the side of the lawyers, because there are cases where we have completed it even within a week or interim orders. All those things are there. But above all these things, there are certain things which has to be taken into account by the judiciary of its own, because we have one judge for 1 lakh people here. The ratio is that. So for 1 lakh people, there is only one judge. So in that case, the infrastructure, the manpower, for example, I would like to say that the copy section, which gives the copies of judgments and depositions in Trichy Court, is never increased, because in 1920s, what was the strength? There were only 12 of them in the copy section. Today, only 20 of them are in the copy section. But in 1920s, there was only 2 courts, but whereas now there are 25 courts. So see the large and voluminous, because the manpower is another one big hindrance and a setback and drawback to the judiciary in both aspects of judges. And we have got more lawyers, but we have got less judges. We have got more litigations, but we have got less courts and less manpower to handle all these things. This is because everything is being posted and diverted towards a lawyer asking for a adjournment. But there are courts where it is lying vacant without a presiding officer, without a judge for years together. So that is a very big setback to the judiciary, which has to be taken into account by the judiciary, and it is being represented over and all, and each and every time whenever chance crops up for every association or whoever is in the responsible position.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a question by
Question
Amit.
in the chat. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Shall I read the
Is
question,
there, is there any, and that's just, is there any institution or court where I can file a case against the Supreme Court or the President?
Only the Supreme Court you can file. It is against a law or and for filing against the President, you have to definitely get a prior permission, and it has to be because he's constituted as a public servant, and prior permission from the government is necessary to file anything. And the Supreme Court is the last resort for any litigant in this country. If it is against any country, then you can go to the Court of Justice at Hague for any aspect which affects the country in entirety. Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, am I audible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, very
There
much.
is another question,
Neela,
ma'am.
you
Yes,
continue with 2 more questions. We can wind up.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. This is a question by Shruti, ma'am. Is there any particular law or act which women victims can use for protection of the life of the victim, which is herself?
Hello? Sorry.
Which is herself after she files a case for DV or 498A or property case or any other being subject to violence. Shall I repeat the question, ma'am? Such a big question.
Yes.
Is there any particular law or act which women victims can use for the protection of the life of the victim, which is herself after she file a case for D.V or 498A or property case or any other being subject to violence.
Yes, under the DV Act itself, she's got a provision for protection of life, safety, and everything. So, interim order can be, even police protection can be sought under the Domestic Violence Act itself. For all these things together, if she needs a case, I mean, she can seek protection from the police or what kind of protection she needs. She can ask the district administration or she has to file a writ in the High Court seeking protection if anything is not being given on her representation. DV Act itself gives her enough and more protection in all aspects. DV Act is Domestic Violence Act.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. We can.
Another
Bye.
question, ma'am. Ma'am, please throw some light on 498. This is a question by Srosri Mukherjee.
498 is actually harassment done on a demand. It basically has got a demand by itself. So 498 A IPC reads thus. This was the section which was used prior to the coming of the Domestic Violence Act. The husband or relative of a husband of a woman subjecting her to cruelty is 498A. Now, whoever being the husband or relative of the husband of a woman subjects such woman to cruelty shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years and also be liable for a fine. Now, cruelty, what does cruelty mean? That is also explained in that section itself, which means that a willful conduct which is of a nature that is likely to drive the woman to commit suicide or to cause grave injury or danger to life, limb or health, whether mental or physical, of the women. Or it is harassment of the women where such harassment is with a view or coercing her to or any person related, not only her, or any person related to her to meet any unlawful demand for any property or valuable security and on her failure to satisfy this demand and pressurizing her to forcing her to commit any of the acts which I have said, suicide or causing injury, are again is defined as cruelty in this section itself. So anything which is being demanded and which is not being met, and for any action for not meeting the demand, amounts to cruelty. Now this was the only section which was dealt for harassment or cruelty against women before the enactment of Domestic Violence Act. One differentiation between this Domestic Violence Act and this section is, this section is a penalizing section. If you find any of the ingredients satisfied in this section, then a punishment is prescribed for 3 years and with fine or with both. Whereas Domestic Violence Act is not a penalizing act. It is first an act which sustains your civil remedies, and on the point where the civil remedy is being failed to be established or to be executed, then it turns into a criminal nature where the punishment for any disobedience of the order of the court in executing the civil right comes only with 1 year imprisonment and fine, or with both. So basically Domestic Violence Act is a civil act, and it tries to, because there are chances for families to come together even after the litigation in the court. Whereas in 498A, it is a tendency when once a case is filed under 498A IPC, the matter ends there and the family is shattered. So that is why to take the family into consideration and to see that the family is not shattered at the very first incident or due to the hesitance or wrong guidance, this Domestic Violence Act was was enacted, and if in the course of action or in the course of trial under the Domestic Violence Act, if it comes out that there has been utmost cruelty done to the victim, then the court itself can recommend for an action or filing of FIR under 498A. So basically 498A is a penalizing section and straight away goes into granting penalty or punishing with penalty, whereas Domestic Violence Act is not so. I think I made a bit clear to you. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Manimekalai, ma'am.
Yeah, we can wind up almost everybody. Yeah.
Yes,
Time.
ma'am.
And I also
Thank
have
you.
another program immediately.
Okay.
Madurai
Okay.
Kamaraj University. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
have
Thank
brush
you,
up.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
May I now
thank you.
request Dr. N. Manimekalai, Director and Head, Dean Faculty of Arts, to render a vote of thanks.
Yeah. Thank you very much, madam, for such a very, what I should say, very systematic, comprehensive presentation, covering right from the child, the fetus to, of course, cremation. That's what you started, and also shared the practical examples in a perspective. It is not just shared the incident and left it. You also presented in a perspective where it is very much going in the gender studies perspective, and you need not have to have a second opinion that there will be a different perspective here with the participants, and these participants are also drawn from across the country and representing women studies and other disciplines also. So it has served both for women studies scholars as well as the other discipline, throwing open the kind of legal provisions prevailing. So in a way, when you are sharing the experience, you have also presented the laws and the provisions. So that itself is, though it is very nutshell, but still it has gone. And very relevant laws and legislations which are required to be known to these participants. So some of the questions are still remaining, but we are not able to, already we have crossed the time also. And some of them had to leave because they are participating in other programs. And one more thing is also the online classes have commenced. And they have to also, some of them have joined late because of that and will be leaving early because of that. So we have to bear with that, but they got the essence of what you have shared, and that shows your experience, how much you have gone into the also the kind of reflections from the field, and you have done thoroughly justice for this topic also. So thank you very much, madam, on behalf of all the participants and the organizing institutions. And as you informed, we keep organizing series of programs, and definitely will be utilizing your expertise there for the entrepreneurship. In fact, the Women Entrepreneurs Association itself is going to have a series of webinar, and wherein we will be utilizing your expertise, and will definitely have this discussion on the women entrepreneurs. Thank you very much. And I also thank all the participants and my own colleagues from the Department of Women Studies and Kaveri College, particularly Dr. Neela and Dr. Sujata, the principal of the college, for helping us to continuously support in co-hosting this webinar. Thank you very much. See you then Monday. Sunday is a holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. I think some of them have asked for my mail ID. I see some questions. You just give them the mail ID.
Please share there in the chat box. They have asked for, you can also look into the kind of appreciation for your lecture, lot of appreciation, and they have there on the chat box, please.
Okay.
And Dr. Gopal Singh is the always be the dynamic participant.
My wife is also here,
and
madam.
yeah,
My wife is also
yeah,
here.
that is the best of it. Bye. Hi.
Thank you.
So
Thank
you'll
you.
shortly be joining there to Madurai also, no? Madurai Kamaraj. Yeah. Hi, madam. Nice to see you here. Every day, Dr. Gopal Singh has been bringing you. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
And some of the participants have asked for the test and other feedback,
Yes,
etc.
ma'am.
So
I
I
will
have just
inform her.
mentioned that it will be done through the groups, and also Monday we will formally announce it also. Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Sure,
Thank you
ma'am.
very
Sure,
much.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.